Chapter 581. That's strange. Where did this Nyoyid come from? Why haven't I heard of him before? In the sacred palace of Baiwan Nation, Wen Lanfeng had an incredulous look on his face as he sat in the palace carved from jade. After the news about Yan Juexing came out, Wen Lanfeng was also shocked. However, he was not interested in robbing others. Instead, he found it unbelievable that Nyoyid could see through Yan Juexing's background. He was the young man that Bing Qingzi brought with him some time ago. At that time, Wen Lanfeng was a little surprised and couldn't help but take a few more glances. He didn't pay much attention to him when he found that he was just a small cultivator in the early stage of passing calamity. However, Nyoyid could see something else. Could it be that his cultivation was higher than his? He was disdainful of Nyoyid's actions in the ghost village. He thought that Nyoyid was at most a liar with a decent cultivation. He didn't expect him to be so capable. Nongzhu sat on the side and peeled the green fragrant seeds speechlessly. It was a kind of hard-shelled nut the size of a fingernail. After opening it, there was white and plump flesh inside, which tasted very fragrant and delicious. This kind of nut could only be found in the sacred land of the Wen family. It couldn't grow anywhere else. Although the nut was hard, with Nongzhu's cultivation, it was easily opened with a light pinch. The white flesh popped into her mouth. He sat on the chair and chewed. Looking at Wen Lanfeng, who was frowning and thinking, he didn't know what to say. He didn't expect it either. He didn't agree to help Yu Qianqiu kill Yan Juexing. In the end, as soon as he left the restaurant, Yu Qianqiu killed Yan Juexing. This kid really did what he said he would do. He didn't hesitate at all. But wasn't the commotion a little too big? They were trying to kill Yan Juexing. What kind of magic art could dominate the cultivation world? Was it so mysterious? Ruthless? He didn't do it himself, but let all the cultivators in the world do it together. Nongzhu, I'm impressed. It said that you are very popular in the cultivation world. I didn't expect you to know this Nyoyid who appeared out of nowhere. You really have a wide circle of friends. Can you tell me who this person is? Wen Lanfeng asked with a smile. Nongzhu knew that she couldn't hide the fact that she met Nyoyid in his territory. She shook her head and said, Old Wen. Who cares where he came from? It's not like he's in your way. What are you worrying about? You can't say that. I have a favor to ask from him. I want you to help me build a bridge, Wen Lanfeng said seriously. Nongzhu's expression froze. She asked suspiciously, Do you have a favor to ask of him? Beg him for what? Limit-breaking pill. Wen Lanfeng sighed and said, I shouldn't be so greedy, but I can't always protect the entire Wen family. There will come a day when I have to leave. He had to make some plans for the Wen family. Can you ask him to sell me some restriction-breaking pills? I'll pay him back. Nongzhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What limit-breaking pill? Who knows if it's a poison or a panacea? In short, it's a scam. Why do you have to give him money? She paused and said with a wry smile, Listen to me. Anyway, as long as it's something made by Nyoyid, you'd better not touch it. It's not as good as you think. Is it fake? Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Nongzhu waved her hand and said, I don't know whether it's fake or not. Anyway, I advise you to restrain your Wen family. Don't get involved in Nyoyid's business. There are only benefits. You just need to watch the fun from the sidelines. By the way, just keep it to yourself. Don't let anyone else know about it. The meaning was very clear. Wen Lanfeng would be an idiot if he still didn't understand. He nodded slightly and said, Thank you. Alas, I'm going back to Shantian Island. The sound transmission formation left by Nanming is still there. Keep in touch. Nongzhu said and left the temple, disappearing into the horizon. Yan Juexing and the others didn't know what the consequences of killing that cultivator would be. In fact, that cultivator was an observation point in this area. He was constantly in contact with people in other directions. It was equivalent to laying a net in this area. When the people in other observation points discovered that the person in this observation point had lost contact, they immediately spread the news. Not long after Man Hu and the others left, 40 to 50 cultivators above tribulation passing stage gathered from all directions. They were all disciples of the world commerce. After looking around, their attention immediately focused on the dense forest below. The person in the lead was Sikongju's fifth disciple, Zhang Zuanxing. Search below. Zhang Zuanxing waved his hand without hesitation. Dozens of people rushed into the forest below and found a dismembered corpse on the spot. A few disciples who were good at tracking quickly searched the area and soon found some clues. One of them reported to Zhang Zuanxing, Martial uncle, from the scene, there are 5 different people's footprints. The number matches with Yan Juexing's. It should be done by Yan Juexing and the others. Zhang Zuanxing looked around and saw that the ground was covered in thick leaves. It didn't look like a place to leave footprints. He asked suspiciously, "How can you be sure it's them?" The disciple cupped his hands and said, "It's hard to be sure. But when they killed our disciples, they shouldn't have exploded the corpses and scattered the blood everywhere. That's why they left footprints." Saying that, he raised a leaf with a bloody footprint and continued to explain, "This was obviously left after they killed someone. Moreover, some of these footprints have one thing in common. When they left, they all headed in the same direction." He waved his hand and pointed southwest. "Over there. They went along this mountain range." Zhang Zuanxing nodded slightly. Southwest was where Di Rong Kingdom went. The two matched, so he made a prompt decision. The opponents are hiding in the forest and fleeing. Inform the people in the southwest to set up an ambush in the forest in front. We'll spread out and search southwest. They won't be able to escape. Remember, when you find someone, send the signal first. Under his command, 2 people flew into the sky to report. The other dozens of people formed a search line of nearly 1,000 meters and swept southwest. The movements of the World Commerce Association immediately attracted the attention of the other powers who were confused. Therefore, the direction of this mountain range immediately became the direction where the powers of the various countries gathered. People constantly entered the forest to search, and the sky was filled with people, almost forming an inescapable net. Man Hu and the other 4 who were fleeing clearly felt the pressure. They could see people in the sky almost constantly when they raised their heads. Moreover, people would occasionally enter the forest to search from all directions. This made it even harder for them to speed up, and they had to constantly hide and run. It was very obvious that the people chasing them had already discovered their precise route. Otherwise, it would not be so obvious in such a large mountain range. They never would have thought that it was because of Yan Zhuixing's little devil fist exploding corpse that caused this disaster. With this torment, the 5 of them immediately felt miserable. From the looks of it, they might not be able to escape. The 5 of them were currently hiding in a concave wall at the bottom of a small hill. The hanging vines had concealed them, but this was only a temporary camouflage and could not last long. Old 7 asked somewhat anxiously, "Eldest senior brother, what do we do?" Man Hu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "What else can we do? If we really can't do it, we can only forcefully break out. Young Palace Master, do you have any ideas?" The few of them looked at Yan Zhuixing together, hoping that he would have a good idea. Yan Zhuixing's face was cold as he suddenly gritted his teeth and said, "Niu Yud, I have no enmity with you. Why do you want to harm me?" The few of them revealed a trace of helplessness when they heard this. His words undoubtedly meant that he had no idea either. But who knew that they would hear him say, "I'll forcefully break out. You guys stay here. Their target is me. They won't do anything to you." The few of them were greatly shocked and said almost in unison, "No." Yan Zhuixing waved his hand at them and said coldly, "Don't worry. If there aren't any soul formation experts, they might not be able to stop me. If I can escape, I'll naturally go to Snowy Mountain to find you guys." "No." Man Hu firmly denied, "All the forces are mobilizing on a large scale. It's impossible that there aren't any soul formation experts among them. It's too risky." "I have an idea," Old 6 suddenly said. The few of them looked at him and Old 7 said excitedly, "Sixth senior brother, what idea do you have? Quickly say it." Old 6 glanced at them and silently took out the sky-shaking whistle arrow from his storage bag. He said in a deep voice, "You guys continue to move forward secretly. I'll go in the opposite direction. I'll try my best to hold on for 2 hours and increase the distance between us. When the time comes, I'll release this whistle arrow and it will definitely attract everyone. When the time comes, you guys take the opportunity to quickly leave." The few of them looked at Old 6 in shock. He clearly wanted to sacrifice himself to attract the enemy so that they could escape. Imagine, if thousands of people found out that they were fooled by him, even if it was Yan Zhuixing, who would let him go? No. Man Hu covered Old 7's mouth with his hand before he could even shout out. They could only hear the whooshing sound of people passing by above their heads. The few of them gritted their teeth and stared at Old 6. Even Yan Zhuixing, who was usually calm, was moved when he looked at him. When there was no more movement, Man Hu extended his hand to Old 6 and said, "Give me the whistle arrow." Old 6 shook his head and hugged the whistle arrow tightly. He chuckled and said, "I'm still hoping that eldest senior brother will avenge me. Leave this matter to me. Right, eldest senior brother, remember to take revenge for second senior brother. Give it to me. You're the senior brother. This kind of matter should be done by me, the junior brother." Old 7 stretched out his hand to snatch it. "You guys leave quickly." Old Six pushed Old Seven's hand away. As he spoke, he also flashed out and sneaked in the direction he came from. Old Six. Sixth junior brother. Sixth senior brother. The few of them anxiously shouted in a low voice and did not dare to raise their voices. However, even if Old Six heard them, he did not turn around and disappeared into the dense forest. The three of them silently lowered their heads with bloodshot eyes. Yan Juexing tightly shut his mouth and his chest rapidly heaved up and down. Man Who suddenly waved his hand and said, "Go, don't waste Old Six's painstaking efforts." Out of the original 5 people, only 4 were left. The 4 figures quickly dashed into the forest. Chapter 582. High up in the sky, a white shadow flew out of the D-Rong Kingdom's territory at an incredible speed and entered the Purple Thistle Kingdom's airspace. This person was none other than Bing Qingzi. Following closely behind it was a white line that flung its tail in flight. It was the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon. At this moment, Bing Qingzi was burning with anxiety. After receiving the urgent situation report from his disciple, Man Who, he did not stop and immediately set off from the Great Snow Mountain. Even the Snow Flood Dragon that had not left the Great Snow Mountain for thousands of years was brought down the mountain by him. He knew what the current situation was like. Even Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou, who were on his side, would fall out with him. His Great Snow Mountain lineage was not strong. Apart from him, only a few of his disciples had a higher cultivation. Furthermore, the guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon, was comparable to a mid-divine transformation realm cultivator. Now that things had come to this, he could only save Yan Juexing at all costs. If he did not try his best to save Yan Juexing, the curse on his body would not spare him. Even if he could abandon himself, he couldn't abandon his disciples. They were as close as father and son. Originally, the Snow Flood Dragon's cultivation could not keep up with Bing Qingzi's flying speed. However, the Snow Flood Dragon was born with the ability to ride the wind and break the waves. It already had the basic attributes of a dragon. It was born with speed. Although the Snow Flood Dragon could not speak, it had already gained intelligence and could feel its master's anxiety. Otherwise, he would not have brought it down the mountain and flown so frantically. On the other side of the Purple Thistle Kingdom, there was a mountain range. However, on this desolate mountain range, there were currently hundreds of people standing. Each of them stopped on the treetops, waiting for something. These people were all divine transformation realm lords of various kingdoms. They were not waiting for others but for Bing Qingzi who might pass by. There was a large-scale search going on ahead. Some people would definitely not allow Bing Qingzi to go over and interrupt them. For example, Yin Baikong, who had a calm expression. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and glanced at Shangguan Taiping, who was on the treetops in the distance, with a somewhat resentful expression. Needless to say, who else but Shangguan Taiping could have spread the news to the whole world? This was equivalent to ruining his plans. Actually, he had wanted to leave first and kill Shangguan Taiping in the Purple Thistle Kingdom to prevent the news from leaking out. Who would have thought that Shangguan Taiping would be so cunning as to spread the news in advance? Soon after, it was rumored that the lords of the various kingdoms were moving out. Yin Baikong naturally couldn't sit still. He was very confident in his forces, but no matter how strong they were, they wouldn't be able to defend against so many soul formation stage cultivators. He was forced to personally come out to hold the line for the World Commerce Association. From time to time, a group of experts from the cultivation world looked around. He was afraid that those 2 people would appear. One was Bai Changchun of the Demon Domain and the other was Wen Lanfeng of the Baiwan Nation. If these 2 people were to come, some people's dreams would be shattered. In fact, there were many people who were eager for the 2 top experts of the cultivation world to appear because it was unlikely for them to get Yan Juexing. It would be better to let Yan Juexing fall into the hands of Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng so that everyone would be at ease. However, the 2 of them had yet to appear. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. This was an expert who truly had confidence in his own strength. They weren't interested in dominating the cultivation world at all and only believed in themselves. Now that things had come to this, many people had already secretly passed down orders to kill Yan Juexing on the spot if they found him. It would be best if their bones were ground to ashes, but their corpses couldn't fall into the hands of others. In any case, even if they got their hands on it, they would probably be attacked by others. Since they couldn't enjoy it, they might as well destroy it and maintain the status quo. Sikongju looked at his master's gloomy face and knew that he was in the wrong. When he received the news, he should have immediately asked Guan Zhongkai to kill Yulan at all costs. There wouldn't have been such trouble then. Now, even if the World Commerce Association got their hands on it, they would probably have to pay a huge price. A figure flew over from afar. After Mu Lianxiu bowed to Yin Baikong and his master, he transmitted his voice. Grandmaster, Master, our people have found traces of Yan Zhuixing and the others. However, there are too many forces following us. I'm afraid that even if we find Yan Zhuixing, it will be a little troublesome. Yin Baikong transmitted his voice expressionlessly. Those who are scattered, gather your strength. Lianxiu, go and pass down my decree. Inform all the branches to gather all the cultivators above tribulation passing stage to reinforce them. Xikong, go and hold the scene. Don't show mercy to anyone who dares to snatch it. Kill without mercy. I'll take care of everything. Yin Baikong was ruthless this time. How could he let others snatch the meat that was already in his hands? The two received the order and Mu Lianxiu rushed down the mountain to inform all the branches. Xikong Ju quickly flew in the direction of the search. The moment Xikong Ju moved, it became lively. There were many people watching this place. Almost 100 spirit-severing experts flew up and chased after Xikong Ju. This made Yin Baikong's teeth itch, but there was nothing he could do. He didn't have the ability to tell everyone not to move. Even if he spoke, they wouldn't listen to him. He wasn't by Changchun. Stone Jade City, the capital of Axi country. A banquet was already prepared in the guest hall of the World Commerce Association's Stone Jade City branch. Niu Yud, who was sitting at the head of the table, was eating and drinking to his heart's content. Yulan Do was in a good mood and happily poured wine for Niu Yud. She didn't need to worry and just followed Niu Yud closely. Anyway, Guan Zhangkai would report the latest news later. It was really good to be able to keep up with the latest news of the cultivation world while having fun. As the two were eating and drinking, they suddenly heard the sound of dozens of people flying in the sky. They seemed to be in a hurry, and from the sound, their cultivations weren't bad. The two looked at each other in shock and didn't know what happened. At this moment, Guan Zhangkai walked in quickly and said excitedly, "Senior Niu, I found it. I found Yan Zhuixing's tracks." Yu Qinshuo's eyes lit up. He put down the pig trotter in his hand and asked hurriedly, "Did you catch him or kill him?" Guan Zhangkai sat down and shook his head. "Not yet, but it should be soon. Since we found his tracks, it shouldn't be long before we catch him." "That's true." Yu Qinshuo chuckled and continued to eat the pig trotter. He thought that with so many people making a move, it would be difficult to catch him alive. He was afraid that many people would rather kill Yan Zhuixing than let him fall into the hands of others. Yulan Do asked casually, "Brother Guan, what happened outside just now? It seems that many cultivators above the tribulation passing stage left. Did something happen?" How could Guan Zhangkai reveal this matter? This was a decree from his grandmaster to gather people. He shook his head nonchalantly and said, "It's nothing. Some blind people came to this branch and the manager went to gather people to support them. It's not a big deal." Yulan Do said, "Oh." She was more or less confused. The three continued to eat the dishes on the table. In the dense forest, Zhang Zuanxing originally led dozens of people to search, but later many people came to help. At this moment, there were hundreds of people advancing in the forest. Even the sky above the forest was followed by a group of people. There were 6 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Old Six hid in a call not far away and quietly observed the movement in front of him. He originally planned to find a way to get further away and then release the whistling arrow. However, with such a dense group of people searching in front of him, there was no way to get past them. Counting the time, only an hour had passed. There was still nearly half of the time until the 2-hour deadline. Needless to say, looking at the situation here, eldest senior brother and the others weren't any better. With a bitter smile, Old Six took out the whistling arrow and retreated into the kernel, gritting his teeth. He raised the whistling arrow, found an opening above and directly pulled it. Chirp. An ear-piercing sound rang out. A dazzling blue light rapidly rose from the forest into the sky. With a loud bang, a cloud of blue smoke exploded. It was like a blue mushroom cloud with a long trail below it, indicating where it came from. If it was at night, this mushroom cloud would emit a blue light to guide the way. The entire region was thrown into chaos. Everyone's eyes looked at the blue mushroom cloud. Someone took the lead and shouted, "The World Commerce Association has found the target. Charge over. Speed up, hurry. We can't let Yan Zhuixing fall into someone else's hands. Charge. Quickly go and support him." Shouts rang out everywhere. Everyone went crazy. There was no other way. Everyone had received a death order. In an instant, countless people swarmed in from all directions. The people who were searching in the forest in the distance all came out to check the direction and flocked in the direction of the blue mushroom cloud. Zhang Zuanxing and the others who were searching were all stunned when they saw a blue light rising not far away. Someone said in shock, "Someone found Yan Zhuixing in front?" This was the sky-shaking whistling arrow that only sounded when the target was found. Then everyone saw a figure quickly flash to the left. Zhang Zuanxing shouted, "Catch him!" Hundreds of people immediately chased after him. Looking down from the sky, the movements of these hundreds of people stirred up the forest. Bang was followed by a few screams. A few large trees fell down. It was already open. Some people who were watching from the sidelines, worried that it was a diversion, could no longer hold it in. The other side had clearly found the target. Both sides had already started fighting, so there was nothing to hesitate about. Therefore they rushed over as fast as they could without any regard for their lives. The chaotic crowd rushed into the forest one after another. Just as the whistling arrow sounded out, Man Hu and the other three who were fleeing came to a stop with a jolt. Old Seven turned to look behind him and said with tears streaming down his face, "Sixth senior brother, didn't we agree on 2 hours? We haven't arrived yet." Man Hu, who also had tears streaming down his face, pulled him. The four quickly hid in a small cave. It was a very shallow and narrow cave. The four of them were tightly squeezed together. 3 out of the 4 people were crying silently. Yan Zhuixing's lips were tightly shut, and his face was stretched taut. Chapter 583. In his impression, other than a bit of affection between family members, there was no friendship between other relationships. In the cultivation world, most people used each other. Ever since he started cultivating devil skills, he had become more and more selfish. His personality had gradually become cold and he didn't believe in these things. However, what happened today had given him too much shock. Especially the heroic act of Old Six sacrificing himself to lure the enemy, it made his cold heart's blood boil. In this sect, although they weren't father and son, they were better than real father and son. Although they weren't brothers, they were better than real brothers. It was rare to see someone risking their life for a brother. It stirred people's hearts. The cruel sounds of fighting in the distance were intense. It was unknown how many people Old Six was facing right now. The straightforward Old Seven looked like a careless, boorish person. But at this moment he was crying like a child and tightly covering his mouth. Old Five closed his eyes and forcefully pressed the back of his head against the soil. Tears silently slid down his face. Man Who had already bitten his lips until they bled. Hearing the movements outside, Yan Zhuixing looked at the 3 martial brothers and pursed his lips into a line. The muscles on his face twitched and he almost couldn't control his emotions. This kind of situation had never happened before, not to mention after cultivating demonic arts. Whoosh whoosh. Another wave of fast-flying sounds swept past above their heads. Then there was no more movement. Only the sounds of fighting came from the distance. This was probably the last wave. Those who should go had all gone. From today onwards, Old 2 and Old 6 grudge is my grudge. Yan Zhuixing's words jumped out one by one. His eyes were abnormally cold. If we don't leave now, when will we? Man Who shouted in a low voice and decisively pushed the others out. The 4 of them quickly fled. The area below where the whistling arrows had come from had already been thrown into chaos. In just a few moments, several thousand people had charged over and rushed into the forest below like a swarm of bees. That scene was very lively. A large patch of the towering ancient trees had already fallen. Eldest martial uncle, stop the people from world commerce. Block the others for me. It's me. Watch carefully before you act. One side didn't want to let the other side take the lead, while the other side wanted to be first. The people who arrived first immediately helped out. The people who came later did not understand the situation at all. When they heard their fellow disciples calling out to them, they did not hesitate to help out. As a result, the battle became more and more intense. It had already become a chaotic battle. Seeing their fellow disciples fall one by one, everyone's eyes turned red with killing intent. As long as someone brushed past him, he would only recognize the clothes and not the person. Letting go would be a killing move. The most unlucky ones were the people from the World Commerce Association. Although they had a lot of people, they were besieged by the various powers. Because World Commerce had taken the initiative to stop the others, when those people's fellow sect members rushed over and saw their own people fighting with World Commerce, they didn't know who Yan Zhuixing was and thought that World Commerce had already captured him. They had come here to snatch people, so there was no need for words. Fight. When the other powers rushed over and saw that almost everyone was attacking World Commerce, they also thought that World Commerce had succeeded. Everyone is fighting for people, let's fight for them too. Fight. Those who came later saw that their fellow disciples were in such a state. How could they just stand by and watch? Helping their fellow disciples fight was definitely not wrong. Fight. Thus, the scene was like a rolling snowball as everyone threw caution to the wind. Although most people didn't know what was going on, it was the general trend. Occasionally there would be some clear-headed people who wanted to stop, but they couldn't. If you didn't fight, someone would fight. If you wanted to fly up to the sky, there would immediately be a few people who would beat you down. Even a clay figurine had a temper. At this stage, if they didn't fight, they would be beaten. Other than fighting, what other choice did they have? Thousands of people fought together in a chaotic battle. It was a spectacular scene. Broken limbs were everywhere on the ground and blood dyed the forest. Behind them, there were still large numbers of people from the various powers rushing over to help. Zhang Zuanxing led several hundred people. From the start, he was the target of the various powers' attacks. At this time, he had already lost most of them. He could be said to be riddled with wounds. Although it wasn't a big deal, he had been harassed by all sorts of people. As for number 6, who was previously surrounded, no one knew where he was. He already had no time to care about himself, so why would he care about others? It was more like he didn't want his life anymore. Clang clang clang. I'll fight you to the death. Save me. The various lights and colors released by the artifacts were dazzling. Intense crashing sounds and miserable cries rang out everywhere. It didn't seem to stop. Right now, number 6 was also fighting in the chaotic battle. With his decent cultivation, he was fine. However, he also suffered many small injuries. The main reason was that the attacks were too concentrated. His clothes had become tattered. Blood splattered everywhere, covering his body. His face was already a mess. Who could recognize him? Actually, at this stage, with so many people coming and going, it was hard to tell who he was. Who could tell who he was? Yan Zhuixing? There were a few people present who had seen Yan Zhuixing before. Even if they knew number 6, who could tell him apart with his current appearance? They didn't have the time to do so. Flying swords and all kinds of magic weapons flew up like rabbits and fell like a cuckoo. The messy explosions made their ears buzz and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Number 6 was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. What are they doing? Forget it. I thought I was dead for sure. Since I have a chance to escape, why stay here? Number 6 took the opportunity to size up the situation. He suddenly leaped up and saw the people fighting in the air, taking the opportunity to launch a few sword astral slashes. In an instant, 5 or 6 people attacked him, forcing him back. The moment he landed, the messy attacks came again. He drew his sword and quickly pointed it in all directions. Chaotic sword chi burst out and blocked the attacks. Since he couldn't get out from the top, he gritted his teeth and fought towards the outside. From the attacks just now, he could tell that the people fighting on the top had higher cultivation. It was too difficult to get out from the top. It was impossible for a single person to deal with so many experts. It was safer to rely on his own cultivation to get out from the side. On the Hengduan mountain range at the border of the Redbud Kingdom, a group of spirit-severing experts heard the rumbling sounds of battle from afar. From the sounds of it, it seemed like the battle had reached its climax. They didn't know what was going on. The reason why everyone was here was to put pressure on the lords of the other factions and prevent them from interfering. At this time, Yin Baikong was calm and composed. He squinted his eyes as he stared at the people rushing in from all directions. There was a hint of arrogance on his face. Most of these people were disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. They had never gathered like this before. This was the first time they had displayed their strength so valiantly. However, good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. If they didn't use it now, when would they? As more and more people arrived at the World Commerce Association, the expressions of many soul formation experts changed. Usually, people only knew that the World Commerce Chamber was powerful and influential. Now that there was an endless stream of people rushing over, it gave them a great visual shock. The World Commerce was indeed very powerful. Everyone knew that this was only the people who came from nearby. Those who came from further away should still be behind, and no one knew how many there were. Beside Yin Baikong, Hu Changshuo's eyes flickered. Suddenly both of them turned around at the same time. Qi Jiujuan, Ouyangda, and Pei Fong were the same. Pei Fong, who had lost a hand, laughed gloatingly. Bing Qingzi is here. The three of them looked at each other. They were somewhat excited, but there was no need to say anything. No matter how high Bing Qingzi's cultivation was, how could he be a match for so many soul formation experts? Once Bing Qingzi died, the three of them would benefit the most from this. Xiao. A high-speed flying sound that could only be produced by a soul formation final stage expert and above could be heard. All the soul formation experts turned around to look. Another soul formation final stage expert was coming from that direction. Who else could it be other than Bing Qingzi? The 5 soul formation final stage experts shot into the sky at the same time, forming a line to block the incoming person's path. Yin Baikong was the first to speak. Brother Bing, why are you in such a hurry? We have been waiting for you for a long time, please stop for a chat. His chances of winning were the highest, so how could he let Bing Qingzi go now? He naturally had to find a reason to make Bing Qingzi stay. Moreover, the other 4 were on his side, so there was no need to be afraid of Bing Qingzi. Get out of my way. Before the person arrived, a wave of angry roars was the first to approach. As far as Chu Tian could see, there was a white dot rapidly approaching. Pei Fong, who had a broken palm, cackled, Bing Qingzi, if you know what's good for you, then stop. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Bing Qingzi arrived at this distance in an instant, but he did not show any signs of stopping. Their expressions changed. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi, who was flying towards them, shouted, "Profound Yin Palm." His palms flew towards them like dancing butterflies. A monstrous wave surged, and the temperature in the air instantly dropped below the freezing point. The few of them turned pale with fright. They saw a sky full of transparent palm shadows rushing towards them. Each palm shadow was as big as a dinner table, and there were at least 300 to 400 of them. In an instant they arrived in front of the 5 of them. The 5 of them were startled. They did not expect Bing Qingzi to attack them without any warning. There were 5 of them here. Wasn't he a little too daring? Because they had underestimated Bing Qingzi's determination, the 5 of them were not prepared to attack. They were all so scared that they immediately teleported away. What a joke, Bing Qingzi's strength was beyond doubt. Other than Wen Lanfeng, it was him. Moreover, this profound Yin Palm was extremely insidious. It was a famous killer move that Bing Qingzi had cultivated by sitting on the Great Snow Mountain all year round and absorbing the cold air for thousands of years. Every time he used it, the cold poison in his body would be reduced. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In short, it was very powerful. If they were hit by 1 or 2 palms, the 5 of them would probably have to go home to recuperate for a month or 2. How could they still fight here? The palm shadows disappeared, but the cold air was still there. Suddenly, there was a short burst of snowflakes floating in the clear sky, which looked colorful under the refraction of the sun. As soon as the 5 of them dodged, they saw Bing Qingzi rushing past them in a blur. Behind him was a huge white python that was as thick as a water bucket. Someone below exclaimed, "It's the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon. Bing Qingzi even brought it here." Chapter 584. Not far from the Stone Jade City branch, on a mountain top that wasn't too high, Yu Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. Occasionally there was smoke curling up from chimneys in the mountains, not sure if it was a village or a hunter's house. Looking to the north, the outline of the entire capital of ACI could be seen. It was a scene of a vast land. Both Guanzhongkai and Yulan stood behind him. They didn't know what he was thinking. They stood motionless for a long time. The 2 didn't dare to disturb him. They only secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission while exchanging glances. From time to time, there were cultivators flying past in the sky. This kind of frequent passing rate was rarely seen. They didn't know what urgent matter it was. It was estimated that the cultivators flying across the sky wouldn't notice the 3 people on the top of the mountain. However, Guanzhongkai and Yulan looked up from time to time. Say, why do the cultivators who fly freely in the sky want to dominate the mortals who work hard on the earth? Yu Qianqiu suddenly waved his hand and pointed to the bustling capital in the distance and asked. Guanzhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't know why he asked this, but this question was really difficult to answer. A person's grandmaster, a person's master, they were all lords. How could they make a rash judgment? But it was not good to not answer. Guanzhongkai took a step forward and said with a smile, "Mortals are so ignorant, how can they be qualified to dominate the world? We cultivators move freely in the world, our vision is broad, we are naturally qualified to dominate them." Yulan also stepped forward and said, "With seniors' cultivation, sooner or later, you will also become a lord, there is no doubt about this." Yu Qianqiu looked around and asked again, "When did the rule that cultivators can't interfere in the affairs of the secular world appear?" The 2 of them were startled at the same time. They looked at each other questioningly. They both shook their heads slightly. Guanzhongkai replied, "This rule has been around for a long time. We really don't know when it actually appeared." "Why does Senior ask this?" Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "Do you think everyone follows this rule?" "Of course." Guanzhongkai said with certainty, Cultivators in the cultivation world basically don't interfere with worldly affairs. Everyone knows this. Then why are there still lords in each country? Take your Grandmaster Yin Baikong and your Master Shengguan Taiping for example. Aren't they meddling in worldly affairs? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhongkai was speechless. Even Yu Lan gave him a look and smiled. This is also for the good of the mortals in the secular world. As long as there are lords in each country, there won't be any chaos. Otherwise, when mortals fight for power and profit, how can there not be conflicts in hundreds of countries? I'm afraid there will be wars every day, and the mortals will be the ones suffering. Yes. That's the logic. Guan Zhongkai echoed. As far as I know, once a country's lord is annihilated by another country's lord, it's the start of a secular war. Start annexing the territories of the losers. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at the two of them, saying, because of this, almost every lord is pressuring the emperors of the secular world to maintain a state of war all year round in preparation for annexing territories. This. Yu Lan smiled bitterly. It's been like this for countless years. Senior, why do you worry about these mortals? Guan Zhongkai also nodded. Yes. Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the two of them and continued, because the countries maintain a state of war all year round, the corvée labor and heavy taxes make the people suffer year after year. Even if they want to rebel, they will never be able to do so because of the interference of the cultivation world. Because the nobles of the various countries have the support of the cultivation world, they are not afraid of their power being overthrown. They take the opportunity to act recklessly and bully the common people. When a regime is rotten and can't take it anymore, it should be overthrown. This is the normal rule. The forceful interference of the cultivation world is against the natural order. The two of them were stunned at the same time and did not know what to say. Yu Qianqiu's words had subverted their common sense. Yu Lan asked tentatively, Senior, what do you mean? You don't have to be surprised. I was just saying. Yu Qianqiu smiled and turned around. There was no point in saying this to them. He narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flickered in his eyes as he examined the world again. During this period of time, he had seen too many hardships of the people's lives. Previously, he was limited by the geographical environment and thought that it was just a problem of the governance of a certain country. Who would have thought that after visiting so many countries, almost all of them were like this? He still could not understand why the common people did not rebel when they were forced to this point. While he was puzzled, he thought of the cultivation world, a colossus that mortals could not overthrow. The lords behind every country were the top experts of the cultivation world. Furthermore, these experts had great influence in the cultivation world. Mortals had no way of resisting at all. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan came to a realization. So he was just saying it casually. They thought that this senior Nyo had gone crazy. Why did he have to talk about mortals? His train of thought was too jumpy. The two of them could not keep up. Senior, shouldn't we make a move? Guan Zhongkai asked. There's no rush. It's too late. It won't be too late to leave tomorrow. Yu Qianqiu said and flew towards the Jade City branch. It's too late? The two of them looked at the sun above them. It was just past noon. Was it considered too late? What kind of logic was this? The two of them looked at each other helplessly. They were used to seeing Nyo Yud's crazy actions along the way. They were not surprised at all. They quickly followed him. When they arrived at the inner hall of the branch, Yu Qianqiu waved to the two of them and said, I want to sleep. Don't let anyone disturb me without my permission. The two of them were speechless again. They could only obey. This was the first time they saw an expert who liked to sleep. On the flying artifact he often slept soundly. What a freak. After the two of them left, Yu Qianqiu stared at Yin Baikong's portrait in the main hall. Although he had sparred with Yin Baikong in Dian Kingdom, the two of them had never met. However, from this portrait Yin Baikong looked like a proper person. He had a sage-like demeanor. He snorted coldly and returned to the room he had prepared for himself. Then he disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu and Zhang Peng were summoned. Zhang Peng had been assigned by Yu Qianqiu to be Guan Yu's adjutant. He was to assist Guan Yu in everything. After greeting each other, Yu Qianqiu did not waste any time. He directly asked, Zhang Peng, what's the cultivation level of the members in the military camp? Zhang Peng replied, there are around 3,000 in the early stage of tribulation passing and 3,000 in the nascent soul stage. There are also around 3,000 who have reached the core formation stage. Yu Qianqiu gave Guan Yu a questioning look. Guan Yu nodded, indicating that it was not bad. Zhang Peng, I have a mission for you this time. Are you confident that you can complete it? Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yes. Zhang Peng became excited. He could not help but ask, Master, what mission? Is it the same as last time? Yu Qianqiu nodded. Not bad, but the scale will be much larger than last time. Then he turned to Guan Yu and smiled. Yunchang, this guy lacks the experience of commanding battles in the cultivation world. This time I'll let him come up with the battle plan. What do you think? Okay. Guan Yu agreed. There was an indescribable loneliness in his tone. Actually, he knew that ever since he publicly disobeyed Boss's orders, the relationship between the two of them was not as good as before. Although Boss still had a polite smile on his face, the fact that he suddenly appointed Zhang Peng as his adjutant was already a very deep meaning. In particular, there were a few regiment commanders who held great power in the military camp. Sometimes they were more obedient to Zhang Peng than to him. Guan Yu also knew in his heart that these commanders were people that Boss would contact in secret. These regiment commanders' attitudes were ambiguous, but Boss's shadow was actually behind them. Before long he would have to retreat behind the scenes, and the position of chief instructor would be given to Zhang Peng sooner or later. Because he understood this, he started to give up power to Zhang Peng. Intentionally or unintentionally, he highlighted Zhang Peng's position in the military. There was no need to fight for anything. In Utopia, no one could win against Boss. Everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu was the leader of the entire Utopia. Zhang Peng could hear the loneliness in Guan Yu's tone, but he was not an idiot. No matter how rash a general who was once good at war looked, he would not be an idiot. Otherwise, how could he always win battles? Although his master did not say anything about his master suddenly assigning him to be Guan Yu's adjutant, he was well aware of his master's intentions after considering the entire sequence of events. Master, I really do not have enough experience. I'm afraid I still need the chief instructor's guidance, Zhang Peng said sincerely and humbly. Guan Yu smiled and said, You can do it. In terms of arranging troops, you are actually better than me. Yu Qianqiu silently looked at Guan Yu and sighed in his heart. It was good that they were both smart people. Otherwise they would fall out with each other. It was good for everyone from start to finish. Originally, when Guan Yu publicly disobeyed his orders, he wanted to directly replace Guan Yu. There was no room for discussion. It would be terrible if he publicly disobeyed orders on the battlefield. However, Guan Yu's position in the army was not low. He was the chief instructor of all the team members. All the team members were trained by him. If he were to directly replace him, the impact would be too great. The morale of the army would be unstable. Furthermore, it would be difficult to find a suitable person to take over. Thus, he threw Zhang Peng over to be the adjutant to learn. He believed that Zhang Peng, who had rich experience in leading troops, would be able to take on the role in the future. From the looks of it, everyone knew what to do. That was good. Otherwise, he would have to use ruthless methods to cleanse them. It's decided. Zhang Peng will lead the organization. If there are any inadequacies, Yunchang will give you more pointers. Yu Qianqiu changed the topic and said in a deep voice, Gather everyone and stand by. Wait for my news. Yes. The two of them accepted the order in unison. However, Zhang Peng was a little confused and reminded, Master, won't it be too conspicuous for so many people to go out at once? He had followed them outside and knew how powerful those soul formation experts were. If they were discovered, it would be troublesome if they couldn't retreat in time. Knowing his concern, Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, The looting outside is in full swing. This is the time when our defense is at its weakest. This is the best time to make a move. With that said, he disappeared. Chapter 585. Seeing that even the snow dragon had appeared, everyone could imagine that Bing Qingzi must have been forced into a corner. Everyone was even more certain about Yan Zhuixing. Someone clicked his tongue and said, Bing Qingzi has even taken out his trump card. Looks like we have to save Yan Zhuixing. Seeing Bing Qingzi pass through, the 5 spirit severing stage experts were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed. Yin Baikang shouted angrily, Bing Qingzi, don't go. Without needing to say anything, the 5 figures flashed and chased after Bing Qingzi. The group of people standing on the treetop of the Hengduan mountain range rubbed their palms together. If the 6 of them were to fight, it would be a good show. Someone shouted, Let's go and have a look. In an instant, a group of spirit severing stage experts flashed into the sky and chased after them. Shui Jiao stopped them. Bing Qingzi shouted without turning his head, and continued to fly rapidly. Moo! A sound that sounded like a cow's moo resounded through the sky. The snow dragon swayed its body and turned around in the air. Its agility in the air was like that of a dragon. The snow-white shining armor shuttled back and forth in the air so fast that people could not see its figure clearly. It was like a soaring dragon in the sky. In an instant, it hovered in the air and stared at the people chasing after it with its bright red eyes. Its crystal-clear antler-like horns reflected magnificent colors under the sunlight. Moo! The sound reverberated through the sky again. A cloud of white miasma burst out from its horns. In the blink of an eye, it covered the sky and spun rapidly in the air. The snow dragon opened its bloody mouth and stuck out its tongue, blowing out a breath of cold air. The thick white miasma suddenly condensed into ice blades and swept towards the people chasing after it. Others might be afraid of it, but the 5 spirit-severing stage experts were not afraid of it. A transparent protective aura quickly appeared on its body and it did not slow down. No matter how the ice blades slashed on it, it forcibly passed through them. It was very powerful. The snow dragon had received its master's order. It would not give up after failing in one attack. It swung its long tail and fearlessly charged towards the 5 people. Accompanied by the wind and clouds, its speed was much faster than when it was flying with Bing Qingzi. Flying dragon in the sky, white dragon phantom. Its momentum was really amazing. The group of people chasing them from afar quickly stopped. He was afraid that this beast would not understand and start fighting with him. It was better to let the 5 experts deal with it first. Insolent beast. Qi Jujuan flew at the front and bore the brunt of the attack. With a loud shout, the Junlin Qi suddenly appeared in his hand. A golden light burst out and he slammed it at the snow dragon. Dang! Ouyangda let out a breath and let out a high sound. Then he swung the snow flood dragon and smashed it downwards. A white shadow was thrown into the deep mountains while spinning. Soon after, a pile of trees fell down, followed by a loud ping sound. Ouyangda glanced down and coldly snorted, "Reckless beast." Then he quickly chased after the few people in front. This happened in just a few moments, but the group of people behind looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know whether this spiritual beast was dead or not. However, since it was attacked by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it died, it wouldn't die in vain. The group of people flew up into the sky and sized up the motionless white body in the pit. All of them revealed a look of pity. After being beaten up by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it didn't die, it would be crippled. Now they didn't have time to pay attention to it. Everyone glanced at it and then flashed away. Bing Qingzi also heard the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. A trace of heartache flashed across his face. However, his expression turned ruthless and he didn't slow down. With the obstruction of the snow flood dragon, it was impossible for the people behind to catch up to him. This allowed him to arrive in advance and save Yan Zhuixing and his disciples, which was very advantageous for him. The battle in front was very intense and they could already see it. Man Hu and the other 3 who were fleeing in the mountain forest heard the mooing sound of a cow. 3 of the 4 people stopped. Yan Zhuixing, who rushed to the front, stopped and said in surprise, "Everyone, let's go. What happened to you guys? Is that the cry of the snow flood dragon?" Old 5 said in disbelief. Because the snow flood dragon never came down from the snowy mountain, how could it appear here? It's Master. Master has arrived. Master has brought the snow flood dragon down the mountain. Old 7 couldn't help but cheer. Yan Zhuixing looked at Man Hu with an inquiring gaze. The latter nodded seriously and said, "Yes, it should be Master." Just as he finished speaking, they heard a rapid loud sound coming from the sky in front, followed by the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. The expressions of the 4 changed. Before they could calm down, they felt a violent vibration coming from under their feet. A ping sound came from the forest in front of them. "Let's go and take a look." Man Hu waved his hand and the 3 immediately followed. When they arrived at the scene of the accident, they saw the forest had collapsed and there was a deep pit in the ground. The few of them surrounded the pit and saw the snow flood dragon shaking its head. Its chin was covered in blood and it was obviously injured. "Snow flood dragon, what happened to you?" Old 7 was the first to jump down and touched the snow flood dragon's head. The snow flood dragon probably heard Old 7's voice and let out a mooing sound in pain. Its voice lacked confidence. It was still shaking its head. It seemed to be dizzy from the spinning and had not recovered. The few of them jumped down. Only Yan Zhuixing was speechless as he looked at the big guy below. This was because he had never seen such a huge python with a horn on its head. Could it still be considered a snake? Under the concern of the few of them, the snow flood dragon stopped shaking its head after a while. Its red eyes began to spin. Looking at the 4 of them, it intimately stuck out its tongue and licked them. However, when it saw Yan Zhuixing above, it immediately revealed hostility. It slightly tightened its upper body and seemed to be about to attack. "He's one of us." Old 7 patted its head and the snow flood dragon calmed down. "Where's Master?" Man Who frowned and asked. The snow flood dragon was shocked and seemed to remember its master. It jumped out of the pit and let out a mooing sound to the few of them below. When the 4 of them flew out, they saw the snow flood dragon stretching its body and rode on it without hesitation. Man Who waved to Yanjuashing and said, "Young palace master, come up." Yanjuashing was stunned. Without hesitation he rode on the snow flood dragon. Man Who patted the snow flood dragon's body and the snow flood dragon shot into the sky with the few of them. In the blink of an eye, it carried the few of them and flew high up in the sky. Hearing this, Yanjuashing was secretly shocked. This white python with a long horn on its head was actually flying faster than them while carrying 4 people on its back. Could this be the legendary spirit beast? Bing Qingzi, who was flying at high speed, was slightly stunned. He saw hundreds of early divine transformation realm cultivators fighting in the sky ahead. What's the meaning of this? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Bing Qingzi immediately thought of a possibility. Yanjuashing had already fallen into their hands and everyone was fighting over him. Black Yin Palm. Bing Qingzi rushed over and in a rage, he waved his palm at the group of people. Hundreds of palm shadows shot out with a boom. Bang bang bang. Ah! The group of people who were in a killing frenzy were instantly hit by the palm shadows. Dozens of people dizzily fell down. Bing Qingzi is here. Someone shouted. Actually, there was no need to remind them. Those who were not hit were also scared witless by the might of the Black Yin Palm. They had long stopped fighting and all of them teleported far away. The battered and exhausted Sikongju stood in the sky not far away with his sword in hand. This time the World Commerce Company had suffered a huge loss. Even he himself had almost lost his life. He had never been in such a chaotic battle before. It seemed that everyone was more interested in attacking the World Commerce Company's people. They were very glad that they could last until now. Looking at the furious Bing Qingzi, Sikongju's battered and exhausted face was filled with uncertainty. He thought to himself, where are Master and the others? Bing Qingzi came from that direction. Could it be that Master and so many people couldn't stop Bing Qingzi? Chapter 586. The people who were fighting below were also startled by the shout of Bing Qingzi is here. They all subconsciously stopped fighting. They looked up dumbfoundedly and saw dozens of early spirit-severing realm experts fall down with a plop sound. The group of people immediately looked at the white-robed angry old man with great reverence. Bing Qingzi, late spirit-severing realm expert. Master. Grand Master. A mess of greetings sounded and many people rushed towards those early spirit-severing realm experts who fell down. Those who fell down were the seniors of many people's sect. How could they not show their concern? The dozens of spirit-severing realm experts who fell down were usually high and mighty. But now, their bodies were covered with a layer of frost, and they kept trembling and their teeth were chattering. Even the people who went to help them couldn't help but shiver when their hands touched them. So cold. Fortunately, these people were spirit-severing realm experts with high cultivation and could withstand it. If it was someone weaker, they would have been frozen into a popsicle and died after being hit by Bing Qingzi's Dark Yin Palm. One could imagine that Bing Qingzi's Dark Yin Palm was not a joke. Just a moment ago it was still very lively, but now it was completely silent. Bing Qingzi looked at the bloody scene below and his eyebrows kept trembling. He couldn't see his disciple or Yanjuashing. A majestic killing intent surged out from his body, scaring the group of people who were trembling with fear and prepared to escape. Master. Suddenly, a voice that Bing Qingzi was very familiar with sounded. A guy covered in blood rushed up and saluted him, but he couldn't see his face clearly. However, Bing Qingzi recognized him immediately and shouted excitedly, "Old 6, you are still alive." That's right, it was Old 6 who couldn't get out after rushing for a long time. Seeing his master suddenly appear, he was a little disbelieving. When he came to his senses, he immediately rushed up to greet his master. Disciple is very lucky and won't die. Old 6, whose face was covered in blood, grinned and revealed his white teeth. He was a little happy. Even he didn't expect that he could survive. Now that his master was here, he didn't have to be afraid. Seeing his disciple's tattered clothes and bloodied body, Bing Qingzi nodded his head vigorously. One could imagine how difficult it was for Old 6 to survive until now. He had climbed out from a pile of corpses. As if he suddenly thought of something, he glanced around and cried out involuntarily, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The 6th brother glanced at the crowd and scratched his head in embarrassment. Just as he was about to speak, he heard someone shouting from afar, "Bing Qingzi, don't run." It was Pei Feng's voice. In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them arrived at the scene. The scene of blood flowing like a river made them temporarily lose interest in Bing Qingzi. All of them stared at the scene below with ugly expressions on their faces. Just by looking at the clothes on the ground, one could tell that there were people who had not died, and there were quite a few of them. Because the 5 of them were the most active and fought the most, they naturally died the most. The rulers who had hurried over were all dumbfounded. They had suffered great losses, and it was like cutting off their own flesh. Especially when he saw the dozens of early divine transformation realm cultivators who were covered in frost and shivering from head to toe, it was obvious that they had been hit by Bing Qingzi's dark yin palm. Pei Fang shouted, "Bing Qingzi, what do you mean?" Although he shouted loudly, he didn't have the guts to fight Bing Qingzi alone. He had suffered losses in Bing Qingzi's hands more than once or twice, so he knew how terrifying Bing Qingzi could be. "What do you mean? There's something wrong with your brain." Bing Qingzi glanced at him and didn't have the time to care about him. He asked again, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The 6th brother scratched his head in embarrassment again. Suddenly, he was stunned and said in astonishment, "Senior brothers and the others should have escaped. Didn't Master encounter them?" "Escape? Why are they still fighting so fiercely after escaping?" Everyone's gaze fell on him. Some of them were dumbfounded as they waited to hear the rest of the story. Bing Qingzi was startled. As soon as he rushed over, he heard the sounds of fighting and immediately stopped searching. He rushed over here with all his might and didn't pay attention to what was happening on the way here. Maybe he was really too late. "Your senior brothers and the others have left. Why are you here alone?" Bing Qingzi couldn't understand. The bloody 6th brother scratched his head again and laughed foolishly. He glanced at the crowd and said proudly, "These people are too much. Under such a critical situation, I separated from my senior brothers and the others. They continued to walk forward while I walked in the opposite direction. When there was some distance between us, I pulled the sky-shaking sound arrow that I picked up to attract everyone here. I didn't expect these people to be so easily fooled." It was a silly dog-eat-dog fight for a long time. Everyone was shocked and looked at the 6th brother with a strange look. If what he said was true, then this guy really made everyone speechless. He was obviously sacrificing himself to cover his senior brothers and escape. Was there such a great person in the cultivation world? But how could he still survive after being beaten like this? No matter whether what he said was true or not, it was a miracle that he could survive after looking at the tragic scene below and the miserable state of his body. It didn't matter if others didn't believe him. Bing Qingzi believed his disciple's words. He pursed his lips and was proud of teaching such a disciple. It was worth it for him to come all the way here to save them. He nodded excitedly and said, "Good, good, good. As expected of my disciple." Yin Baikong could see that most of the people who died here were his world commerce's people. He shouted with a gloomy face, "Bing Qingzi, how are you going to explain this matter?" "Explain what?" Bing Qingzi knew that his disciple and Yan Zhuixing were fine and immediately calmed down. He stared at him coldly and said with narrowed eyes, "Just for a groundless thing, you actually dared to attack my disciple and still ask me how to explain it? I want to know how you are going to explain it." "Bing Qingzi, don't give me that." Pei Fang continued, "If you don't give us a satisfactory answer today, don't even think about leaving." Bing Qingzi sneered, "Fatty Pei, don't brag too early. Since I dared to come here today, I was prepared not to go back. Fatty Pei, let me say this first. Today, even if both of us die here, we will first kill you before we die. I guarantee that you won't be able to escape. If you don't believe me, you can try. Killing one of you isn't much, but killing 2 of you isn't a problem." As he spoke, he sized up the other 4 soul formation final stage experts. His eyes were unusually fierce, as if he was picking another person to die with him. Which one of the top figures in the cultivation world wasn't a ruthless person? If he was forced into a corner, no one would doubt his determination. Pei Fang's chubby face stiffened. If Bing Qingzi really went all out to kill him with his cultivation, it would be hard to say what would happen to him. Moreover, he was missing a hand now. The saber in his right hand had become a left-hand saber. He wasn't used to using it. The other 4 were stunned. Just like what Bing Qingzi said, he probably dared to come here alone because he was prepared to die. If Bing Qingzi wanted to go all out, could he kill 1 or 2 of them? Who could deny this with absolute certainty? The atmosphere immediately became a little strange. Although the master and disciple were surrounded, no one dared to make the first move. Since Yan Zhuixing had already escaped, it wasn't worth it to go all out against Bing Qingzi. The most important thing now was to find Yan Zhuixing. In Utopia, the army was ready for battle. Close to 10,000 people were evenly distributed according to the ratio of tribulation passing stage, nascent soul stage and core formation stage. They were divided into 30 groups. In other words, in each group, there were close to 100 tribulation passing stage, 100 nascent soul stage and 100 core formation stage cultivators. They were all mobilized. In order to seize the favorable opportunity, Yu Qianqiu personally scouted the place where they were going to attack as fast as possible. Chapter 587. He stared at the ground and memorized the sequence of attacks. Then he slowly closed his eyes and established contact with the 90 attacking points in the outside world. His divine sense quickly spread out and enveloped the team members below. The teams disappeared one by one and only one team remained. Their task was to be a substitute. Yu Qianqiu remained floating in the air with his eyes closed, maintaining contact with the 90 attacking points outside. The surroundings were quiet, and no one made a sound to disturb him. In a wilderness in Shiman country, a large area of rubble was piled up, forming a rocky hill. Experienced cultivators could tell that these were the rubble that had been produced by mining spirit stones. The rocky hill was a wasteland in the southern suburbs. Not even a single weed could be seen and there were only piles of rubble. 300 masked men suddenly appeared out of thin air. The leader of the masked men quickly scanned the terrain and confirmed that it was their target. He faced the target and waved his arms forward. Attack according to the original plan. The 50th early stage tribulation passing expert quickly leaped into the air and pounced toward the first target. The communication formation was the first point they had to destroy. They had to destroy it at all costs as quickly as possible. They could not give the other party any time to spread the news. Once the other party spread the news of the attack, it might immediately attract strong reinforcements nearby. Although they did not know if there were strong reinforcements nearby, they could not take this risk. The first attack had to break the other party's throat. They could not let the other party make any sound to the outside world. Because of this, 50 of the 100 most experienced cultivators at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage were sent out to destroy the enemy's communication point. Enemy attack. A terrified cry came from the high ground. However, it only managed to make one sound before it was dismembered by 3 lightning-fast flying swords. 3 masked men in black landed on the high ground. The leader was the leader of this team. He was also the leader of Utopia's first team and enjoyed a high honor in Utopia. On both sides were the deputy leaders, and all 3 of them were early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators. The 3 of them stood with their backs facing each other and coldly looked at the 200 or so team members who had surrounded the entire Spirit Stone mine in broad daylight. Although the 3 of them were very confident in their combined strength, it could be seen from the position they were standing in that they were constantly on guard. This was the result of a long period of actual combat training. His tactical attainments were extremely high, and he would not allow any accidents to happen because of his arrogance. He had to be careful in every battle and treat it seriously. Although there was only one warning cry, it was enough to alert everyone in the mine. Inside the cave, inside the stone house, a large group of cultivators flashed out. Everyone first looked towards the observation point, but what they saw were 3 majestic masked men. A burly man with a curly beard stood out from the crowd. He was obviously the most important person here. Just as he was about to shout at the 3 masked men, he saw nearly 50 men in black forming a triangular formation and rushing towards a cave. The mustached man's expression changed and he immediately reacted. These people wanted to destroy the communication array that connected to the outside world. He immediately shouted, "Stop them! Protect the communication array!" The group of people quickly shot up into the sky and chased after them. The guards outside the communication array also rushed to intercept them. The first person in the front corner of the triangular assault formation quickly made 2 hand gestures, and the 50 people all threw out their arrow talismans. Dense yellow lights whizzed out like rain, and the people who rushed to intercept them were immediately thrown into confusion. The last row of 10 people in the triangular formation immediately turned around and rushed back after throwing out the arrow talismans. The flying swords in their hands flew out, forming a sword net to strangle the people chasing them. On the spot, dozens of people let out mournful screams. Blood rained down along with dismembered corpses. Such a fierce and swift attack immediately scared the people who rushed over, and they didn't dare to continue. Some people even turned around and fled without hesitation. The triangular formation that had been shortened by a section plunged into the crowd of people blocking them. Flying swords flashed fiercely, and miserable screams rang out continuously. 10 people separated from each side of the triangular formation to deal with the opponents outside the cave. The remaining 20 people formed a small triangle that went straight into the cave entrance. There were 6 core formation stage cultivators guarding the cave entrance. Seeing that the attackers were so powerful, they were already scared silly. They didn't even fight, but they knew that they couldn't stop them. 4 people immediately ran to the sides, and 2 people turned around and ran back into the cave. Unfortunately, the 4 cultivators didn't run away. They were already surrounded outside, and the only thing waiting for them was to be killed without mercy. As soon as the small triangle went into the cave entrance, it immediately split into an even smaller triangle. 10 people directly rushed into the cave, and the remaining 10 people guarded the cave entrance. Soon after, 2 screams came from inside the cave, followed by a series of chaotic explosions. Soon after, the 10 people who rushed into the cave came out. The leader of the small team made a gesture of success to the leader on the high ground, indicating that they had successfully destroyed the communication array. This only happened in a few moments. From the moment they launched their attack to the moment they destroyed their target, the small team didn't even stop and directly rushed into the cave. Even the cultivator who was preparing to send a message to the sect was killed before he could activate the communication array. The leader made a gesture to the small team leader, and the small team immediately became the main force of the cleanup. 5 people in a group they quickly scattered and killed. It was unknown what the 2 vice leaders said to the leader, but the leader made a gesture to shrink the encirclement, and an even more bloody and tragic massacre began. For a moment, screams rang out everywhere, and in this bloody web of over 300 people, no one could escape the final misfortune. The whole battle ended very quickly. In less than an hour, the ground was already covered in pools of blood. The wind was bleak and the blood was very thick. Many people's bodies were torn to pieces, and those who died in one piece died with their eyes wide open. Their lifeless eyes reflected a group of black-clothed people shuttling back and forth, cleaning up the battlefield. Anything that was worth a bit of money was taken away. The entire team quickly gathered. 2 of them were clearly injured, and it seemed that their injuries weren't clear yet. They were carried back to the team. The 3 people on the high ground also returned to the team at the same time. The leader took one last look at the battlefield. From start to finish, it took less than an hour, and the mission here was successfully completed. He took out a small black flag from his storage bag and casually threw it at a large rock. With a ding, it stabbed into the rock. A gentle breeze blew, and the golden word "Hero" fluttered in the wind. The leader raised his hand to touch the silver-coated nameplate on his chest and injected his divine sense. All the team members did the same. Even the 2 injured team members were helped to cover the silver-coated nameplates on their chests. They would return together. They wouldn't leave them behind. In Utopia's military camp, Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the sky with his eyes closed, frowned slightly. He sensed the fluctuations of divine sense from the outside world. His divine sense surged out and traversed to the outside world. In the blink of an eye, a group of people returned successfully. These people didn't have time to rest. They removed one of the 3 storage bags from their waists and threw it to the side. 2 of the injured team members were carried out of the formation. 2 people immediately flashed over from the reserve formation and joined the battle formation. Then the team disappeared from everyone's sight once again. They had completed one of the 3 attack points, but there were still 2 more that they hadn't completed their mission. Chu Pinger waved her hand and a group of women quickly flashed over. The 2 injured team members were carried away for treatment, and the storage bags on the ground were also cleaned up. After they left, another group of people returned after the battle. The various countries were mobilizing their manpower to snatch Yanzhuaxing, but Yu Qianqiu was taking advantage of the country's weakest defense to plunder the spirit stone mines. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Everyone was afraid of Hero. Usually there were many experts guarding the spirit stone mines, so it was very difficult to strike. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, so it would be a waste not to do it. If he wanted to do it, he might as well do it this time. It would probably be very difficult to succeed so easily the next time. Actually, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to strike at those places that were more profitable. Although spirit stone mines were places that produced spirit stones, very few people would store a large amount of spirit stones in a spirit stone mine in the wilderness. They would save up a little and send it back. However, it was different for the headquarters or branches of the world commerce. There were a lot of spirit stones circulating every day, so it would be a great harvest to strike a few of them. However, there were many people in such places and they were all guarded by experts. It would be troublesome if they bumped into the experts who were doing business here. Not to mention the headquarters of the world commerce, even the branches of the world commerce wouldn't dare to act rashly with Yu Chincho's current strength, let alone the headquarters of the world commerce. With Bing Qingzi, who was currently the third most powerful person in the world, it would be a lie if the other 5 people didn't care once he made a move. It wouldn't be worth it to fight Bing Qingzi with all his might without even seeing Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing shouldn't have escaped far. Let's find Yan Zhuixing first. When the time comes, there will be a way to pry open his mouth. Whether it's a groundless matter like what Bing Qingzi said, we will know once we ask. Pei Fong changed his tone. Since he had misgivings about using force with Bing Qingzi, he might as well use another method. You dare. Bing Qingzi shouted. The profound ice sword had already appeared in his hand, and his aura had directly locked onto Pei Fong. The latter's expression stiffened, and he looked at the other 4 people. Yin Baikong carried the God of Fortune sword and said indifferently, Brother Bing, everyone is here to clarify the matter. Everything will be clear once we find Yan Zhuixing. You better think it through. Don't go against the cultivators of the world. When the time comes, it won't look good for everyone. Bing Qingzi coldly stared at Yin Baikong, and his murderous aura was faintly discernible. The other 5 people immediately became alert. At this moment, high up in the sky, the sound of high-speed flying could be heard again. Everyone raised their heads and saw a white shadow flying over. Who else could it be other than the snow flood dragon? Immediately, someone clicked his tongue and said, A spirit beast is indeed a spirit beast. It's actually fine. There seemed to be 4 people sitting on it. Man Hu and the other 3 who were riding on the snow flood dragon knew that the snow flood dragon was bringing them to find their master. However, when they saw the large group of people below from the sea of clouds, their expressions immediately changed. They had finally escaped from the wolf's den, but the snow flood dragon had sent them back. Wasn't this asking for death? Chapter 588. What does this snow flood dragon want to do? Yan Zhuixing asked. He even suspected that the sect wanted to offer him to settle the matter, but he felt that it was unlikely. Because if Bing Qingzi wanted to harm him, the curse on his body wouldn't let him off. Man Hu punched the snow flood dragon's back and shouted, Snow flood dragon, turn around and run. The snow flood dragon responded with a loud cry. How could it run when its master was down there and the person who beat it up just now? Shaking its head and tail, it rushed down with a whoosh. Master is down there. Old Seven exclaimed. Since Bing Qingzi was here, Yan Zhuixing could only bite the bullet and continue. At least for now, it would be safer to stay by Bing Qingzi's side. Otherwise it would be difficult to escape. Under everyone's gaze, the snow flood dragon arrived with 4 people on its back. It circled around Bing Qingzi and his disciple and let out a soft moo. Man Hu and the other 3 also rushed to Bing Qingzi's side and saluted. Bing Qingzi was startled when he saw the 4. Then, his face sank and he transmitted his voice to Man Hu. Since you escaped, why did you come back? You're courting death. Man Hu replied helplessly, We met the snow flood dragon on the way. Who knew it would bring us back? It's too late to escape. The snow flood dragon stared at the 5 with its red eyes and tensed its body, ready to attack at any time. It remembered clearly that it was these 5 people who beat it up just now. Suddenly, it heard its master snorting unhappily. It turned its huge head and saw its master staring at it coldly. After living together for so many years, it knew clearly that its master was going to teach it a lesson. It shrunk back in fear, not knowing what it did to make its master unhappy. It weakly let out a moo. Bing Qingzi saw its snow-white head and lower jaw dripping with blood. Obviously it was injured before. His heart softened and he turned his head away. Eldest senior brother. The bloodied 6th brother called out. Man Hu and the others looked over and immediately revealed an expression of disbelief. They said excitedly, You're still alive. They hugged each other with obvious excitement. They had a lot to say, but they knew this wasn't the right place. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching only to find it by chance. Pei Fong sneered as he stared at Yan Zhuixing. Many people here had never seen Yan Zhuixing before, but almost all of the soul formation experts present knew him. Because they had met at Wen Lanfeng's place. Now it was as if a monster had seen Xuanzang. All of them had a greedy look on their faces. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile and said, I should have guessed it long ago. When Brother Bing's disciple was still in the Chinese cultivation world, he was always protecting Yan Zhuixing. Naturally there must be a reason. It turns out that he was hiding a big secret. Everyone subconsciously looked at the bloody scene before them and their expressions twitched. If it really was a rumor spread by Nyo Yid, then this loss was not worth it. But no one would believe him just because of one sentence. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he sneered, "That's hard to say. Maybe you knew that sooner or later you wouldn't be able to escape from our palms. You can escape today but not tomorrow. So you purposely did the opposite and spread lies to mislead everyone. You've got guts. Do you really think we're so easy to fool? For Bing Qingzi's sake, as long as you tell us your extraordinary martial art, we can consider letting you go." "That's right." The top experts looked at each other and echoed. "Fatty Pei, I think you're really tired of living. How dare you threaten my disciple in front of me?" Bing Qingzi shouted. He knew that in this kind of situation he couldn't show any signs of weakness. Otherwise, everyone wouldn't mind joining forces to beat him down. Only by being strong would everyone have some misgivings. Man Hu and his fellow disciples also revealed a look of not hesitating to fight to the death. All of them held their weapons and cheered for their master. This scene made everyone secretly sigh. This was indeed a sect that was as close as a father and son. If it was their own disciple, he would have shown fear under the pressure of so many experts. How would he dare to risk his life against a spirit-severing expert? "Master, please calm down." Yan Zhuixing bowed to Bing Qingzi and said, "The more I argue, the clearer it becomes. Master, please allow disciple to argue." Bing Qingzi snorted and agreed. "Thank you, Master." Yan Zhuixing turned to Pei Fong and said, "May I ask Senior a question?" Pei Fong sneered, "Let's see what tricks you can come up with." Yan Zhuixing said calmly, "From Senior's words, you seem to think that Junior has a peerless martial art. Do you think that my master already knew about this?" "Kid, it's not that I think so, but everyone thinks so." Pei Fong waved his broken hand and pointed to the surroundings. "It's human nature. It's understandable." Yan Zhuixing nodded and said, "May I ask Senior, if my master already knew that I had a peerless martial art and the ambition to conquer the world, would he let me live until now? Would he have allowed me to live until now? Wouldn't he have taken me to Snowy Mountain when everyone didn't know and forced me to use the peerless martial art to cultivate? Wouldn't that be safer? Wouldn't he have waited until Nyo Yid misled the crowd and made everyone come here to kill each other? Then he would come to save me at all costs? Don't you think it's suspicious?" This series of questions was thought-provoking. Especially the phrase "kill each other," it made everyone's hair stand on end when they saw the bloody scene. What was Nyo Yid trying to do? Was he trying to incite everyone to kill each other? Chapter 589. Yin Baikong's eyes lit up and slightly nodded. "That's right. Brother Bing, it's easy to prove your disciple's innocence. Let him follow me to the headquarters and confront Nyo Yid. At that time, everything will be clear. If it really has nothing to do with Yan Zhuixing, I promise to send him safely back to Snowy Mountain." At the same time, he looked at Sikongju with a gentle gaze. This method was simply the best for him. Once Yan Zhuixing meets with Nyo Yid, whether it's true or not, his world commerce wouldn't be able to escape. If Nyo Yid could prove that Yan Zhuixing indeed had a peerless martial art, then everyone wouldn't need to fight over him anymore. Yan Zhuixing was already in his hands. If Nyo Yid was lying, then he wouldn't be able to leave the world commerce so easily. One must know that the headquarters of the world commerce was filled with experts. With Yin Baikong personally overseeing it, 2 spirit-severing disciples, and a bunch of late-stage crossing tribulation experts, not many people in the cultivation world could come and go as they pleased. Yan Zhuixing didn't know what to say. There was no reason to refuse. He couldn't help but look at Bing Qingzi. Bing Qingzi naturally couldn't let Yin Baikong take Yan Zhuixing away. Although he repeatedly denied the fact that Yan Zhuixing had a peerless martial art, he was well aware that what Nyo Yid said was true. Just think about it, Nyo Yid was actually able to see through Yan Zhuixing's background with a single glance. With such ability, Yan Zhuixing would probably have nowhere to hide in front of him, and he wouldn't be able to hide it even if he wanted to. At that time he would probably not be able to return. Everyone's gazes also looked at Bing Qingzi to see what he would say. To prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence, Sikongju's method was the best. If he didn't agree, then he definitely had a guilty conscience. Then don't blame everyone for being impolite and snatching what should be snatched. Yin Baikong, I don't deny that your method isn't good. Bing Qingzi said in a deep voice, but if I let you take my disciple away in front of me today, then where would I put my face in the future? If I can't even protect my own disciple, then as his master, I won't be able to show my face in the future. Hearing this, many people exchanged glances. Sure enough, he still had a guilty conscience. All of them stared at Yan Zhuixing with interest, eager to make a move. Hee hee. Yin Baikong smirked and said, Brother Bing, this won't do, that won't do. Do you have any way to prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence? Now that things have come to this, I'm sure you're also aware that this matter has to be resolved. Seeing that everyone was pressuring their master, the hot-tempered seventh disciple could no longer bear it and shouted, What have we done wrong to you? We need to prove our innocence to you. Yin Baikong's gaze was like lightning as he stared at the seventh brother. He sneered and said, This old man is talking to your master. Since when is it your turn to interrupt? Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped the furious seventh brother from speaking again. He said to Yin Baikong, I naturally have a way to prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence. Then we'll be all ears. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile. Obviously he didn't believe it. Everyone stared at Bing Qingzi waiting to see what he could say. Bing Qingzi's cold eyes swept across the crowd. With a wave of his hand, the profound ice sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This action startled everyone. They all thought that he was going to make a move. Who knew that a dang sound could be heard? Bing Qingzi flicked the sword with his finger and a crisp sound reverberated in the air. He raised the sword and said in a clear voice, I, Bing Qingzi, swear to the heavens that if my disciple Yan Zhuixing possesses a peerless martial art, let me Bing Qingzi die a horrible death in the future. Absolute silence. Everyone was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be so ruthless. He even made a deadly oath. This Yin Baikong and the others looked at each other. If they didn't believe it before, then what about now? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that Bing Qingzi would use his life to make a false oath. Man Hu and the others who recovered from the shock couldn't help but shout, Master! Yan Zhuixing silently stared at Bing Qingzi. He owed this sect too much. Only the few of them knew that Yan Zhuixing did possess a peerless martial art, the demonic book. However, their master made a false oath. This would definitely be punished by the heavens and the cultivation world. Bing Qingzi waved his hand at them and said, It's nothing. Since we can't explain it clearly to them, we'll use facts to prove it. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future. He then stared at the five of them and said indifferently, Everyone, do you believe me now? Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyangda looked at each other. They felt it was a pity to let Bing Qingzi go just like that. Originally, they wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. However, it wasn't a good time to do so. Once they started fighting, Yin Baikong and Hu Changshu wouldn't just sit back and watch. Yin Baikong and Hu Changshu's expressions were a little awkward. The former smiled and said, Brother Bing, don't misunderstand. Since the matter has been clarified, it's naturally fine. I hope Brother Bing won't take it to heart and understand. The change was really fast. However, the three of them were originally in a group of benefits. As long as there weren't any other benefits that could split the three of them, the past would naturally be the past. After all, they still had to deal with each other in the future. They were all experienced people and wouldn't be swayed by their emotions. They only knew what was true. Bing Qingzi coldly snorted and said, Let's go. Under everyone's gaze, the master and disciples rode on the snow flood dragon and soared into the sky. Brother Bing, have a safe journey. Yin Baikong and Hu Changshu cupped their hands and sent them off. The group of gathered experts looked down again. They didn't know where their anger came from. Yin Baikong pointed down and stared at Sikongju as he shouted, What exactly is going on? Yan Zhuixing and the others have already escaped. Why are you all still fighting here? Sweat appeared on Sikongju's forehead. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He turned around and called Zhang Zuanxing, who was also battered and exhausted, to question him. The lords of various countries also gathered their subordinates to reprimand them, asking them what exactly was going on. In the end, after a long discussion, one of them said that he saw someone fighting and went to help, while the other said that he saw someone fighting and went to help. They didn't know what they were fighting for. Only in the end did they understand. The main culprit was Bing Qingzi's disciple. Because he released the sky-shaking arrow to lure the enemies, a group of people swarmed over and messed up the plan. This made the lords of various countries unbearably angry. This matter definitely couldn't be blamed on Bing Qingzi's disciple. He didn't do anything to provoke him. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for being blind. As a result, they all started scolding him. The lords of various countries had a belly full of anger. Before they even returned to their own territories, some of them were already furious. Hero had looted 90 spirit stone mines in half a day. At the same time, he had committed crimes in 90 different countries. Every country was shocked. Hero had obviously taken advantage of the time when the country's defenses were at their weakest. However, Hero didn't go too far this time. He only killed people and didn't blow up the mines. However, the number of cultivators killed in 90 mines added up to a terrifying number. Although most of them were low-level cultivators, there were more than 20,000 cultivators. On average, there were 200 to 300 people killed in each mine. Not a single one survived. This was a shocking massacre. He had killed more than 20,000 cultivators. The entire cultivation world was a little dumbfounded. This hero was too ruthless. How could he do it with so many people? As a result, they all condemned Hero. What made all the countries palpitate was that 90 different locations were attacked at the same time. How many people did he use? When did such a huge force hide in the cultivation world and no one knew about it? The unknown was the scariest, and the unknown intentions were the scariest. For a moment, all the countries felt insecure. When talking about Hero, their expressions changed. They all mobilized people to protect the important locations, afraid that Hero would come to them again. The cultivation world, which had been a little restless recently, suddenly became much quieter. Currently, many people in the cultivation world were very depressed. Yu Qianqiu was one of them. After receiving the news that Yan Zhuoxing was safe and sound, he was extremely depressed. He didn't expect that Yan Zhuoxing would still escape even after being forced to such a state. Didn't this mean that Yan Zhuoxing was indeed a character from another angle? On a flying magical artifact, Yulan was controlling it. The wind and clouds brushed past the ship's side, quickly flying over thousands of mountains and rivers. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting at the back, suddenly sighed, "Scourge. Scourge." He felt that the harder it was to kill Yan Zhuoxing, the more powerful he was. If he was left alive, he would definitely be a scourge in the future. He didn't know what logic was behind this. "Senior, who are you calling Scourge?" Guan Zhongkai asked expressionlessly. After knowing that Yan Zhuoxing was fine, he was also in a bad mood. He had already been scolded by Sikongju, who said that he would deal with him when he returned. Since even his grandmaster had confirmed that Yan Zhuoxing was fine, it was most likely that Niu Yud was lying. This time he had really caused his own death. However, this fella's cultivation was too high. Putting aside the fact that he couldn't beat him, he didn't even dare to scold him. He didn't even dare to show his face. Yulan, who was controlling the flying magical artifact, didn't look any better. His master, Shenghuan Taiping, even had the heart to kill him. Who asked him to lie about military intelligence, causing his master to offend a large group of people. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, then sighed, "Nothing, I was talking about the hero. This hero is really a scourge. He actually killed so many people." Sigh. Scourge. These 2 days he had heard many people talking about the hero. Then where does Senior think the hero came from? Guan Zhongkai said perfunctorily. "You're asking me?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose, then suddenly chuckled, "If you ask me, other than your World Commerce Association, I really can't think of anyone else with this ability. Think about it. The hero obviously took advantage of the moment when the country's defenses were at their weakest. Such a large-scale attack, it was obvious that they were prepared. And regarding Yan Zhuoxing's matter, your World Commerce Association was the first to know, right? You also had the best chance to set it up in advance, right? Plus, World Commerce Association has so many people and that kind of ability. So, this so-called hero is actually most likely your World Chamber of Commerce." Chapter 590. Senior's joke is too big. Guan Zhongkai's tone was not very confident and his eyes were slightly dazed. Hearing Niu Yud's words, he thought of something. As the third-generation head disciple of the World Commerce Association, he knew that the World Commerce Association was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Even though he was not deeply involved in some things, he still felt that something was wrong. Grandmaster Yin Baikong, other than having many wives and children, he also had many disciples. Who in the cultivation world didn't know that Grandmaster was very good at teaching disciples? He had taught 2 soul formation disciples and there were at least 100 tribulation passing experts. He didn't even know how many martial uncles he had. This was also one of the main reasons why the World Commerce Association was so powerful in the cultivation world. In the eyes of outsiders, these martial uncles were the backbone of the World Commerce Association's headquarters. They were always stationed in the treasure bowl and Grandmaster Yin Baikong rarely used them. But he unintentionally discovered that these martial uncles seemed to be doing something in the dark. There was once when he went to ask his master but was reprimanded by his master, telling him not to worry so much and to do his own thing. Guan Zhongkai had always had doubts in his heart, but hearing Niu Yid's words, he was suddenly enlightened. At the same time he was secretly shocked. Could it be that hero was really a force of the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched when he saw his appearance. He glanced at Yu Landou, who seemed to be listening attentively, and his lips curled into a smile. Then he poked his head out and said patiently, "I'm right. Did you remember something?" Guan Zhongkai came back to his senses and repeatedly denied, "Senior, you can't say such things. Our World Commerce Association is definitely not a hero. Think about it. Our World Commerce Association is also one of the victims this time. A spirit stone mine was also bathed in blood by hero. You can fool others, but you can't fool me." Yu Qianqiu winked and smiled evilly. The reason why hero looted World Commerce Association spirit stone mine was to help World Commerce clear of suspicion. Otherwise, others would always suffer and only your World Commerce Association would be fine. Plus, only World Commerce Association has the ability to do such a big thing. It would be strange if outsiders didn't suspect you. That's why. Your World Chamber of Commerce is very smart and ruthless. In order to deceive people, they killed their own people to divert everyone's suspicion. The more Yu Qianqiu spoke, the more reasonable it became. Even the fake became the truth in his words. This gave Guan Zhongkai a fright. Guan Zhongkai nodded and didn't say much. In reality, he was also a little apprehensive because he had made a mistake and didn't dare to see his grandmaster. If he could delay it, it would be good to see him later. Very soon, the flying artifact landed at the foot of the mountain between two peaks. These two mountains weren't tall, but they looked quite strange. They were like twins, almost identical in appearance. Standing at the edge of the clouds and mist, they were like two guards standing there silently, adding a bit of mystery to this place. Guan Zhongkai put away the flying artifact and said to Yu Qianqiu, who was looking around, "Senior, please follow me." Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed the two people in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. After going deep into the clouds and mist, he realized that this fog was really not ordinary thick. With his cultivation, his visibility was at most 3 meters. After walking between the two mountains, he realized that there was actually a cliff in front of him. A chain bridge extended from the clouds and mist to the side of the cliff. Judging from the direction of the thick main chain that was pulling the suspension bridge, the fixed place should be between the two mountains. Walking on the bridge, Yu Qianqiu didn't understand. What's the meaning of this? Can't we just fly over directly? Why do we need to make a suspension bridge? Guan Zhongkai walked as he turned back and explained, "Senior, you may not know this, but because this is where our sect's headquarters is located, the security here is very tight. This cloud and mist isn't an ordinary defensive formation. It's an extremely powerful killing formation. The only way for outsiders to enter and exit this place is this suspension bridge. When crossing this bridge, if anyone leaves the vicinity of this bridge, they will immediately be sucked into this killing formation. Of course, people with the sect's permission will open other paths to enter and exit." Yu Landou also turned back and said, "Also, this path can be sealed at any time." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, "This defense is indeed quite tight. It's very hard for people who want to go in and cause trouble to break in. It's even harder for people who want to come out after causing trouble to escape. That's natural. The World Commerce Association has always done its best to provide the safest trading ground for cultivators in the world," Guan Zhongkai said rather proudly. The three of them walked for nearly 200 meters before reaching the end of this bridge. In front of them was a cave. On both sides of the cave, there were two large tiger heads peeking out. They were very lifelike and looked like they were made of black iron. The two main chains of the suspension bridge were spat out from the tiger's mouth. It was very mighty and extraordinary. After entering the cave, it was bright inside and was filled with fluorescent stones for illumination. About 5 or 6 meters into the cave, they discovered that there was a stone room dug out on both sides of the cave. There were several cultivators sitting in each room. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right and found that there was actually no one he could see through their cultivation. Chapter 591. As expected of the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce. Even the gatekeepers were at least at the tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu was secretly awed. Guan Zhongkai cupped his hands in greeting and greeted, "Martial Uncle." Yulan followed suit and cupped her hands in greeting. A man walked out from each of the two stone chambers and nodded at Yulan. His gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly introduced, "This is Niu Yid, Senior Niu. He's someone Grandmaster wishes to see. This disciple has been ordered to lead the way. So it's Mr. Nyo. One of the men cupped his hands in a more amiable manner. Yu Qianqiu nodded in acknowledgement. The other man had a taut face and a serious expression. He frowned and asked, Guanzhongkai, since you're honorable master's guest, why are you walking here? Guanzhongkai replied, Senior Nyo wishes to see the scenery of cornucopia and specifically requested to enter from here. The man replied, Mr. Nyo, to enter from here, you need a jade archive as a guide. Do you have one on you? Yu Qianqiu could hear a hint of displeasure in his tone. He thought to himself, did I offend you? He calmly shook his head and said, no. Then there's no other way. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to turn back and enter through a special passage. The rules here cannot be broken, the man said expressionlessly. Guanzhongkai was stunned. Yulan also looked left and right in astonishment. The other man with a more amiable expression said in a low voice, Junior Marshal brother, don't be rash. This is honorable master's guest. He cupped his hands in greeting and smiled at Yu Qianqiu. Mister, please don't be offended. My junior marshal brother has always been like this. Please follow me and apply for a jade archive. After that, you'll be able to enter and exit freely. So it's possible to apply for a jade archive. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He stared at the unfriendly man and asked softly, so you're saying that you're deliberately making things difficult for me by asking me to turn back? Guanzhongkai was shocked. He had personally experienced Nyo Yid's prowess. Moreover, Nyo Yid had a bad temper. Even his master couldn't handle him. Immediately, he bowed repeatedly and said, Senior, please calm down, calm down. Even Yulan took a step back, her eyes darting around as if she was ready to watch a good show. The person with the amiable expression also came out to smooth things over. It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart, don't take it to heart. Junior brother, hurry up and apologize to Mr. Who would have thought that the man would say with a cold face, apologize? I didn't say anything wrong. Without the Jade Archive as a guide we can't enter from here. Not to mention, I didn't stop him from applying for the Jade Archive. Alright. Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, You've got guts to provoke me. You must be tired of living. Then he immediately inscribed a set of incantations into the Jade Archive. Soon the incantations were completed and handed to Yu Qianqiu. How many spirit stones do you need? Yu Qianqiu waved the Jade Archive in his hand. That person waved his hand and said, Senior is my master's honored guest. How could I dare to accept your spirit stones? Then he gave Guanzhongkai a look. Guanzhongkai understood and hurried over to invite Yu Qianqiu to leave. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to waste his time here and left with the two of them. That person remained behind Miao Yi and bowed, saying, Farewell, Senior. Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head, slowly letting out a sigh. He thought to himself, I finally sent this terrifying guy away. How terrifying. With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu walked forward. The people standing in the passageway hurriedly made way for the three of them. They all stood on either side of him and looked at him with reverence. These people were cultivators from various places who had to pass through the passageway. They didn't expect to bump into the famous Nyo Yid here. Not to mention they even got to watch the show. However, the aura that filled the cave just now was too terrifying. Even now, everyone still hadn't fully recovered from it. After walking for a short distance, they discovered a profound light screen blocking their path. The color of the light screen was almost exactly the same as the luster of the fluorite. If they weren't careful, they would definitely bump into it. The three of them took out their jade archives and imbued their true origin into it. A ray of white light struck the light screen and 3 holes just wide enough for 3 people to pass through appeared. After the 3 of them passed through, the light screen quickly closed up again. Such a profound wave light screen, in the short passage of nearly 100 meters, actually had 3 obstructions. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh at the tight security of the World Chamber of Commerce. If someone caused trouble and wanted to escape, even if they could break through these 3 light screens, it would still take them some time. Similarly, people who tried to barge in from the outside would face the same problem. Meanwhile, the World Chamber of Commerce would have enough time to react and respond. Once they exited the cave, their eyes suddenly lit up. A bustling city was right in front of them. It was built in a basin surrounded by mountains. It was hard to imagine that such a bustling city could actually exist in such a desolate and uninhabited primeval forest. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. This was a cornucopia. It really did look like a basin. It was far bigger than the 100 Flowers Valley, and far more lively than the 100 Flowers Valley. Although it wasn't as big as the capitals of the various countries that Yu Qianqiu had been to, the various buildings here were all exquisite. They couldn't be compared to the ordinary commoners' buildings in the secular world. Thinking about it, it made sense. Most of the buildings here were representatives of the various powers of the cultivation world. How could the secular world compare? The most conspicuous was the cone-shaped towering mountain in the middle of the buildings. The cultivation world's famous god of wealth peak stood in the center of the cornucopia, the core of the World Chamber of Commerce. All sorts of buildings surrounded the foot of the mountain, spreading out in a circular pattern. Guan Zhongkai saw the astonishment in Yu Qianqiu's eyes and was somewhat pleased. He smiled and said, "Senior, this is our World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. Please." He pointed to the steps beneath his feet and made an inviting gesture. Yu Qianqiu nodded and the three of them followed the steps into the basin. Stepping into the bustling city, people came and went. It felt like the streets of the secular world. If they didn't know that this was the cultivation world's famous World Chamber of Commerce, who would have believed that they were currently in an important area of the cultivation world? On both sides of the street, there were pavilions with green tiles and vermilion eaves. Wine shops and commercial buildings could be found everywhere. There were even some places where new buildings were being built. As Yu Qianqiu looked left and right, he couldn't help but sigh that Yin Baikong was indeed a talent for business. He managed to manage such a remote place into such a prosperous place. On the way they saw people constantly greeting Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. However, when they saw the two of them respectfully accompanying a middle-aged man, they couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. They felt that he looked a little unfamiliar. But then they remembered that the two of them had been accompanying a certain person in the cultivation world during this period of time. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered who that person was. Not long after, the news that Niu Yid had arrived at the World Chamber of Commerce spread through the entire cornucopia at lightning speed. Dormant Spring? Yu Qianqiu stared at the signboard of a building and read it out loud. Then he looked at the dozen or so gorgeously dressed women downstairs. These women were basically all at the foundation establishment stage. They constantly tugged at the male cultivators passing by on the street. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth, thinking that he was seeing things. He asked the two of them blankly, "What are they doing?" "Soliciting customers," Yulan said disapprovingly. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief, "Could this be a brothel? There are brothels in the cultivation world? Do cultivators do this? Are they being forced?" When he said this, his expression didn't look too good. Guan Zhongkai explained, "No one is forcing them, they're all voluntary. Some itinerant cultivators don't have a source of spirit stones and want to continue cultivating in the cultivation world, so there are many who do this. After they save up enough spirit stones, they'll concentrate on cultivating. When they run out of spirit stones, they might come out and continue doing this. Of course, this place isn't like the brothels in the secular world, they won't restrict personal freedom. Here, the brothel keeper takes a cut. If you want to do it, you can come and go. It's very convenient." Chapter 592. Very convenient? Yu Qianqiu's expression was lifeless. He really didn't expect that these immortals in the eyes of the secular world would actually be in this line of work. He subconsciously couldn't accept it. He shook his head helplessly and said, "They're all quite good-looking. Of all the things they could do, why did they have to be in this line of work?" Yulan looked at him with a somewhat strange expression. It was the kind of expression that seemed to say that he didn't understand the suffering of the world. She smiled and said, "Senior's cultivation is profound. I'm afraid you rarely come into contact with low-level cultivators, especially those itinerant cultivators. They'll do anything for spirit stones." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Who said that? I've come into contact with many itinerant cultivators in Ghost Manor, but I've never heard of cultivators in this line of work." Yulan smiled and said, "Who would go around talking about it after doing this line of work? It's only made public in cornucopia. In fact, there are many itinerant cultivators out there who do wild work, but it's not safe. They often put in the effort but don't get anything in return. They might even get themselves killed." "That's right." Guan Zhongkai nodded and said, "It's different here. As long as they pay taxes, they'll receive the protection of world commerce. They'll get something in return if they put in the effort." "Are these people all itinerant cultivators?" Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at Spring Slumber. "Of course. Cultivators with sex all have a source of spirit stones." "Who would do this?" Yulan said. "When I was in Ghost Manor, I heard that there are many female itinerant cultivators who marry into sects. Those male itinerant cultivators can't even find a partner for dual cultivation. Why don't they find a sex disciple to marry? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhangkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled. The latter said disdainfully, there are female itinerant cultivators who marry into sects, but they're very few. How many of these female itinerant cultivators who have been fooling around outside for so long are still virgins? In order to survive, who knows how many people they've dual cultivated with? Most of the sex disciples are just playing around. It's not easy to marry them. It's already not easy to get past the elders of the sect. Which sect would accept prostitutes? Wouldn't we become a laughing stock if word got out? Guan Zhangkai nodded in agreement and said, if he really is a talented loose cultivator, the various sects will fight to recruit him. However, there are very few who marry into the sect. What Senior has heard are all rumors and cannot be trusted. Actually, the situation of female loose cultivators is even worse than that of male loose cultivators. However, they are also more vain. They do things that they have to swallow and pretend that they are living a good life. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Thinking about it, this era was different from his previous world. It was extremely feudal. Most of the legitimate marriages were first-hand goods. It was difficult to find a legitimate husband for second-hand goods and above. Besides, when he was doing well in his previous life, he seemed to have quite a number of subordinates who were in this line of work. Didn't he turn a blind eye to it? There was no reason for him to come here and have such a messy sympathy for others. The three of them had been standing there for a long time. Because of Guan Zhangkai, they had already alerted the brothel keeper inside. He saw a graceful and beautiful young woman swaying her hips as she walked out. She waved her hand from afar and shouted, I was wondering who it was. So it's Master Guan. You haven't been here for a long time. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Zhangkai suspiciously. It seemed that this guy was a regular here. Yulan Do had a calm expression as if this was normal. The young woman tried to drag Guan Zhangkai inside. Guan Zhangkai laughed and pushed her away, saying, I still have something to do today. Don't mess around. Master Yu, are you busy? The young woman stayed by Yulan Do's side again. Yulan Do also said that he had something to do and pushed her away. In the end, the young woman stared at Yu Qianqiu again. She smiled coquettishly and said, I haven't seen this master before. Why don't you two introduce him to this servant? Although Yu Qianqiu didn't like this, he was happy to deal with such a knowledgeable person. He wanted to tease her a little. Suddenly, he heard a quarrel in Spring Slumber Loft. There were also faint sounds of fighting. The young woman's expression changed. She apologized to them and hurried back. Yulan Do laughed and said, Someone is making trouble in Cornucopia. I wonder which family's young master is it? Guan Zhangkai's expression turned a little ugly. After a while they saw three people pulling a woman out. The woman struggled with all her might and kept shouting, Let me go. A group of Orioles came out of Spring Slumber Loft and seemed to be watching the show. Looking at the scene, it didn't seem like someone was making trouble. Guan Zhangkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't understand. Yu Qianqiu felt that the three men were familiar. He seemed to have seen them somewhere. Someone was making trouble in Cornucopia. This was something new. Many people immediately rushed over to watch the show. At this time, the Orioles and Spring Slumber Loft opened a path. The beautiful young woman came out and indifferently walked in front of them. She said, I don't care what relationship you have. If you want to leave or stay, my Spring Slumber Loft can't stop the three of you. But the expenses of the three of you can't be less than 1 spirit stone. Also, you have to pay for everything broken inside. However, compared to Lu Feng, who was in the early stage of the tribulation passing realm, they were still a bit weaker. In addition, they were from the Blue Palace, so there must be more than one person here. If they fought, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and sighed. Seeing that the three people didn't dare to speak, Lu Feng was even more pleased. He pointed at the woman and said, Isn't she just a wandering cultivator? My Blue Palace disciple is giving her face by messing with her. What? You three are not convinced? His words made the group burst into laughter again. The beautiful woman's expression changed. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. The disciples of the top 10 cultivators were so powerful that she couldn't afford to offend them. The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He thought to himself, Damn it. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a despicable person. Even I don't dare to be so despicable. How dare she steal my limelight? I really can't stand it anymore. If I watch too much, I'll lose my appetite and lose face as a man. I'm a man, so I can't just stand by and watch. Yu Qianqiu nudged Yu Lan and Guan Zhangkai who were in front of him. The two didn't know what he was going to do, but they still moved aside. He walked out expressionlessly and stood quietly behind Lu Feng. Everyone's eyes were on him. Guan Zhangkai and Yu Lan looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. Amano and the other two looked over and were stunned. They had seen Niu Yud at Ghost Manor, so they naturally knew him, but they didn't expect to see him here. Seeing that everyone was looking over, Lu Feng thought that they were looking at him. He continued to be arrogant and proud. He pointed at Amano and the other two and said, "How dare you say that you want to kill the Blue Palace disciple in public? I think you must be tired of living." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt someone pat his shoulder from behind. As soon as he turned his head, his vision blurred. Then he heard a paw sound. His eardrums buzzed and he felt a burning pain on his face. It was so painful that it was a little numb. Lu Feng staggered a few steps and shook his head to see clearly who had hit him. It was a middle-aged man with a smile on his face. He subconsciously asked, "Who are you?" Then he remembered that he had been hit in public. He immediately shouted angrily, "You're courting death." Without another word, a blue flying knife flashed out of his pocket and directly shot towards the other party. Yu Qianqiu still looked at him with a smile on his face. The flying knife flew towards his chest, but he didn't dodge it. He just lightly flicked his finger at it. His movement was so casual that it was like he was chasing away a fly. With a clear ding sound, the blue knife paused in the air for a moment. Then, like a deflated balloon, it turned into sparkling blue powder and drifted to the ground. Blue Maple's earlier arrogance had completely vanished, and he didn't dare to make the first move like he did earlier. Even though he had been beaten, his tone became a little more respectful. At this moment, what he was most worried about was whether Niu Yud would still make a move. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand dismissively and said, "Compared to your Blue Palace, this little bit of fame is not worth mentioning." Someone in the crowd snickered. What did he mean by saying that a little fame was not worth mentioning in front of the Blue Palace? You dared to beat up someone from the Blue Palace in front of everyone and you still said it so modestly? Even the beautiful lady boss couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She stared at Yu Qianqiu with interest. Guan Zhangkai on the other hand openly smiled. Pei Feng had always been a sworn enemy of Grandmaster Yin Baikang. However, the World Chamber of Commerce did business with the people of the world, and their reputation was their priority. It was not good to find fault with them in cornucopia. Now that Niu Yud had made a move, it couldn't be any better. This guy was famous for being reckless. Others might be afraid of Fatty Pei, but he probably wouldn't be afraid. The truth had already been proven. The World Chamber of Commerce's law enforcement guards quickly swept over from the street. Guan Zhangkai flashed out and blocked their way. No one knew what he said to them, but they looked at each other and smiled. They all stood on the rooftops to watch the show, deciding not to enforce the law for the time being. Blue Maple saw the crowd's mocking eyes and immediately blushed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, you are a contemporary expert. Why are you deliberately making things difficult for me?" Fuck. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disdainfully and said, "You already said that I am a contemporary expert. Do you think I would deliberately make things difficult for you?" The crowd snickered again. They found that Niu Yud's words were a bit shameless. He really didn't have the demeanor of an expert. But when they thought about it, demeanor didn't seem to have anything to do with Niu Yud. Then why did Senior hit me? Blue Maple's tone became a bit tougher. After all, it was under the watchful eyes of the public. If he continued to weaken the Blue Palace's reputation, he was afraid that he wouldn't end up well when he returned. Yu Qianqiu said, "There's no other reason. I just couldn't help but want to slap you when I saw your cheap mouth. What do you have to say about that?" The crowd roared with laughter. Blue Maple immediately trembled with anger and said sternly, "Niu Yud, don't go too far. Do you really think that the disciples of the Blue Palace are so easy to bully?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "That's right." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three of them and said indifferently, "Where's the courage to cause trouble in the World Chamber of Commerce? I don't accept cowards as my subordinates." As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people looked at Amano and the other two enviously. What he meant was that if they killed Blue Maple, they would be his subordinates in the future. The three of them weren't fools. They naturally understood what he meant. As itinerant cultivators, they knew how rare this opportunity was. Even if they had to risk their lives, it would be worth it. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing of Ghost Manor were so glorious after they followed Niu Yud. They could order all the experts in the final stage of the tribulation stage around the world around, which made many itinerant cultivators envious. Something that could only be imagined in their dreams actually happened to them. The three of them looked at each other. They were in high spirits as if they had been injected with chicken blood. If they didn't take this chance, they would be letting themselves down. So they nodded at each other. With flying swords in hand, they dashed forward and immediately surrounded Blue Maple in a triangular formation. "Try and touch me if you dare," Blue Maple threatened. A blue saber appeared in his hand again. He looked around as if he didn't want to fight and wanted to escape. "Kid, I'm here. If you dare to escape, I promise you'll die a horrible death." Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "If you can defeat the three of them, I'll spare your life. If you dare to escape, I'll kill you immediately." Blue Maple's face turned pale. He immediately dismissed the idea of escaping because he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape from such a terrifying expert like Niu Yud. As his eyes drifted, he suddenly stopped and saw Guan Zhangkai in the crowd. He immediately said loudly, "Senior Guan, our Blue Palace does business in cornucopia and has paid all the taxes. We should enjoy the protection of the World Chamber of Commerce. Is the World Chamber of Commerce really going to turn a blind eye to it? Where is the credibility of the World Chamber of Commerce?" This accusation was too big. Guan Zhangkai's expression changed and he waved to the roof. The law enforcement guards flashed to the middle and surrounded Blue Maple. The latter was slightly relieved. He wasn't afraid of Tianyi and the other two but Niu Yud. The other side was clearly determined to kill him. If such an expert played any tricks during the fight, he probably wouldn't even know how he died. At this moment, 5 or 6 people in blue clothes appeared out of nowhere and flashed to the scene. They also protected Blue Maple. Blue Maple glanced at them and silently gritted his teeth. He couldn't say anything at this time. But he was well aware that these fellow disciples had been nearby just now. They probably didn't dare to come out when they saw Niu Yud looking for trouble with the Blue Palace. Now that the World Chamber of Commerce's people had stepped forward, they appeared one by one. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.